I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And welcome back to Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
It is week 3 of Public Domain Movie Month. The featured decade for this week is the 1950s. I selected the 1958 film God's Little Acre. We just finished watching it about 2 or 3 minutes ago. Rob didn't know what we were going to watch till about 90 seconds before we started watching it, so he's coming in completely blind. First impressions.
I have heard of this film before, though this was my first time seeing it. I now understand its reputation.
So what had you heard of the film?
Just that I was aware of the film, I was aware that it had a reputation, but I didn't know a lot of details about its reputation or about the plot of the film. Mm-hmm. So really, I didn't know a lot other than the title of the film. I was familiar with it and was aware that it had a reputation.
Yeah. And we will, of course, go into that reputation. And you're probably wondering a little bit why I selected this as the film for the 1950s.
I can see why this would be on your list for numerous reasons.
Yeah. So, obviously, when talking about public domains, films in the 1950s, the first thing that comes to my mind is bad science fiction. But we're going to leave that to the 1960s.
So you're holding off to conclude with that.
So I thought, the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to public domain bad 1950s science fiction, other than Roger Corman, is Ed Wood. And I was very tempted to do an Ed Wood movie, but I feel like if we do Ed Wood, we're going to have to do at least 2 movies, one of which is the Tim Burton biopic of Ed Wood to provide context. But when thinking what else to do for the 1950s, this came to mind. It's a film I've only been aware of, I think, for maybe a year or 2.
Really?
And how I became aware of it was the television show Goliath on Prime with Billy Bob Thornton as a lawyer who's in California, but he's from the South. And there's an episode where he is having a conversation with someone, and he makes a reference to God's Little Acre, and they kind of look at him confused, and he's like, well, I guess that was before your time. I'm like, that's an obscure reference. I'm going to have to look that up. So I looked it up and saw what it was, and I'm like, yeah, I think that's one I'm going to have to see at some point. It is based on a 1933 novel by the same title, by a man named Erskine Caldwell, who's best known for this and another novel called Tobacco Road.
So how many times have you seen this coming into tonight?
I've never seen this before.
Really?
This is I mentioned earlier that there was going to be one of the weeks I was going to do something I hadn't seen.
Well, you were making jokes about future references in the movie at the beginning.
Was I?
Yeah.
I guess it
I said, are you telegraphing the future of the movie? And you said yes.
No, I don't know. Maybe there was a misunderstanding in that, but it's not particularly difficult to tell the general direction this film is going in.
Well, this was early enough. It was, yeah.
Yeah. The novel was kind of notorious, and of course the movie would be as well.
The movie, it was close enough in time to when the book was written. The movie carried much of the stigmatism and reputation that the book carried.
So what I was anticipating is kind of a low-rent Tennessee Williams or a hillbilly Peyton Place, and that's more or less what we got, but kind of in reverse order and reverse halves of the film. The first half is a hillbilly Peyton Place, and the second half decides to go kind of more serious, like, oh, we're really actually about something, and they go more Tennessee Williams. One of the things that I thought was interesting about this is it's a 1930s story. It still feels very 1930s, but it's not set in the 1930s. And that was not immediately clear until later in the film. Family and the Buddy Hackett character driving old 1930s automobiles.
Yeah, Pluto Swint.
But when they get into town, the cars are all from the 50s. And there's a police car later in the sheriff's car in the kind of epilogue, and they're all from the 50s. But the plot is very 30s. They're Dust Bowl types. There's a labor rights kind of subtext that comes in late in the film. I wish they had committed.
The controversy about it.
I wish they had committed and made it a 1930s set film. I imagine they didn't, largely for budgetary reasons. We don't want to have to get a bunch of period cars, and yeah.
Well, considering there's not that many cars, it wouldn't have been too difficult.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. I think that was.
I think
the
more
mistake.
It had to do with they had issues in selecting a filming location.
I saw something about that.
Yeah. We'll get into that when we get into the trivia.
We'll get into the trivia. Okay. So,
the plot of this film, the plot summary from IMDb says, in the 1950s, a poor Georgia cotton farmer and his sons search for the gold presumably buried on the farm by their grandfather, but problems related to poverty, marital infidelity, unemployment, and booze threaten to destroy their family.
Yeah. This film is directed by Anthony Mann, who's best known for his Western work. He went a long way to creating the kind of the darker, him and Hitchcock, the darker Jimmy Stewart of the post-war years.
Yeah,
in films like Winchester 73 or The Man from Laramie.
His known for on IMDb as El Cid, Men in War, The Glenn Miller Story, and God's Little Acre. So,
the cast to this film is quite impressive. Largely people that are, weren't real stars yet, or they were fading stars. This is Tina Louise's film debut, best remembered as Ginger on Gilligan's Island. She is the last surviving cast member of that series of '88. She was 24 when she made this film. She had been and continued to be a model when this was made. She would appear in Playboy the same year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it stars her. It stars Robert Ryan as Tai Walden, the patriarch of the Walden family who's obsessed with digging for gold. Aldo Ray as Will Thompson. Aldo Ray is a character actor who is in a lot of kind of lower grade films. In the movie Inglourious Bastards, the Brad Pitt character is named Aldo Ray.
Oh, really? Huh.
Buddy Hackett plays Pluto Swint, your typical Buddy Hackett character. He is attempting to be elected sheriff of the county. He is that perfect kind of bumbling, overweight sheriff type. Jack Lord plays Buck Walden, who is married to Tina Louise's Griselda.
Yep.
What's interesting is both Tina Louise and Jack Lord are best known for island-based television shows they did in the 1960s. So Gilligan's Island and Hawaii Five-0. We've got Faye Spain as Darlin Jill. Faye Spain was did a lot of these kind of films, kind of slightly seedier films. She's perhaps best known for this or playing Lilith in an Adam and Eve film that came out around this same time.
Yeah.
Vic Moreau is Shaw Walden. Helen Westcott, Rosamond. Lance Fuller, Jim Leslie. Rex Ingram, Uncle Felix, who's kind of a black farmhand trying desperately to get his boss to actually plant cotton and not waste all the time digging for gold. His career goes back to the silent era. Michael Landon shows up as Dave Dawson, an albino who the Waldens kidnapped from the swamp because they are informed by Buddy Hackett's character that albinos have the ability to divine gold. And so they tie him up, they bring him to the farm, they're like, you need to find this gold. It's like, I'm not going to do that. Well, why not? I don't know how.
Well, and he's eventually run off the farm by Rex Ingram's character.
Yeah.
Hasn't Rex Ingram made an appearance on the podcast before?
I don't know if Rex Ingram has. I've seen him in a number of things. He's the genie, or the djinn, in the Thief of Baghdad film, an Alexander Korda epic from 1940.
He's also in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
He's in Sir Hurry Sundown, which is another Southern Gothic film made about a decade later.
I think I've seen him in other things. He's also in Tarzan of the Apes, the 1923 Ten Commandments, some other things. So I think I've seen him in other films, and that's where I recognized him from. But, yeah, he's a familiar character.
So the basic plot of the film, I mean, we went over it in thumbnail sketch, but it's basically about the Waldens trying to find this gold that their patriarch believes is buried on the property, but almost nobody else believes that. Issues with keeping the farm stable, issues with a cotton mill that got shut down in a neighboring town that Aldo Ray worked at, and of course Aldo Ray is married to Helen Westcott's Rosamond, even though he is in love with his sister-in-law, Tina Louise's Griselda. Everybody likes Griselda in this film. She has quite the introduction in that dress, and they just keep dressing her that way throughout the film. She's obviously there.
They actually cover up her a little bit more later on.
Yeah.
However, they never cover up Faye Spain.
Yeah, Faye Spain. You see plenty of Faye. One thing that we both commented on that is introduced and kind of dropped, and that is very Tennessee Williams, is the relationship between Griselda and her husband's seeming disinterest in her physically, alone among the male characters.
That he's interested in her, but he's upset with this fact that she's never gotten over her infatuation with Will.
I guess so. But I thought there was a subtext there that is completely dropped at the end of the film.
Well, because at the end of the film, he is interested again.
Yeah, because the brother-in-law died in the ill-conceived attempted labor takeover of the factory.
Yeah. The drunken takeover?
The drunken takeover, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna pull that switch and light up the whole world.
Yeah.
And he does.
Yeah.
And shortly thereafter, his lights go out permanently. What did you think of that scene? So he goes to the factory to turn it on, even though it's been closed down. There's that old security guard guy played by Russell Collins, the watchman, who had been trying to bribe him earlier. It's like, I'll buy you a drink, just stay away from the factory. And when he turns everything on, wakes up the watchman who comes in. They can't hear each other because the factory machine's so noisy, and then he ends up shooting him.
Yeah.
Ultimately, fatally. I think that scene was very clumsily staged. I really didn't buy it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I thought it worked fine in the context of the film.
He seemed so surprised that the gun went off. I was like, what did he think was going to happen? He was aiming the gun.
He's an old night watchman who, just going by instinct and not actually thinking his things through. So, well, and since we're this far down the cast, there's only two other credited cast members who we haven't mentioned, so we might as well mention them. Davis Roberts is the farmhand with Ho.
At the very last
who
scene,
only appears
at
the very
not
end.
A line of dialogue.
Who also is known for his appearances in Star Trek and the Waltons. And then you have Janet Brandt, who is the irate woman outside the saloon.
Ah, yes.
And that's her credited role, is irate woman. She's most known for her appearances in Cheers and The Incredible Hulk.
Do we have other thoughts you wanted to share on this, or do we want to get to the trivia?
I really enjoyed this movie. The beginning I felt like was a little bit slow. I was kind of wondering where it was going. But by the end of this film, I was really enjoying myself. And I enjoyed the film overall. Yeah, I've looked up a few different things about this in addition to our typical IMDb trivia.
Oh, okay.
In 1967, there was a re-release of this film. In that re-release, it attempted to appeal to the new generation by playing up the sex in the advertisements. The 1967 poster for this movie featured the drawing of a topless woman beneath a bare-chested man on a bed, as well as a topless but chaste photo of co-star Faye Spain that was definitely not in the picture itself. For this re-release, Tina Louise was given top billing, and Michael Landon went from 10th billing in 1958 to 2nd billing.
Yeah.
According to an article in the August 9th, 1957 edition of The Hollywood Reporter, Anthony Mann and Security Pictures were denied permission to film on location in Georgia. Civic and business leaders feared the film of Erskine Caldwell's 1933 novel would portray the state in a negative light. Mann scouted locations in Louisiana and the Carolinas before settling on a site outside Stockton, California.
Yeah. And it looks southern. It looks efficient.
Yeah. The originally second billed Aldo Ray does not appear in the movie until 30 minutes in.
Indeed.
According to an article in the May 31st, 1958 edition of Daily Variety, $75,000 was spent by the production company to shoot alternate scenes to be substituted for theaters in the southern states, should any objection to certain aspects of the picture. There is no record of the alternate version ever being shown. It'd be interesting if someone found those clips somewhere.
Yeah.
Pardon the background noise. We have recording companions today, as in my dogs. Joan Collins originally tried out for one of the female leads in this movie.
And all the three female leads are gorgeous.
Yeah. This film was preserved and restored by the UCLA Film and Television Archive. So that's who we have to credit for the beautiful version of it that we saw today. So you made reference to some of the cars. The Walden's car is a 1930 Lincoln Model L Sport Phaeton. Pluto's truck is a 1934 Ford Model BB.
And producer Anson Bond submitted a script based on Erskine Caldwell's novel to the Production Code Office in January 1950, but it was rejected.
Yeah.
So this is a property, had been around since the early 30s. The book was published, the year before the Production Code went into full enforcement, so they didn't have a chance to make it then. And obviously, it took some severe laxing in the Production Code to make this film. And a thought that I had while watching this is, why hasn't it been remade?
I have a little bit of a roundabout answer. I have an article that I had looked up while we were watching the movie that I was going to read, and I think that article comes as close to answering that question as anything else that either of us could say. This article comes from a website called publicdomainmovie.net.
Neat.
However, I think it's basically pulling most of its content from Wikipedia. The film was as controversial as the novel, although unlike its source material, it was not subjected to prosecution for obscenity.
Wow.
Although both the book and the film were laced throughout with racy innuendo, calling into question the issue of marital fidelity, the film adaptation may have been the more alarming because it portrayed a popular uprising or workers' insurrection in the southern United States by laid-off mill workers trying to gain control of the factory equipment on which their jobs depended. When the film was first released, audiences under 18 years of age were prohibited from viewing what were perceived to be numerous sexy scenes throughout, although in recent decades the film's scandalous reputation has diminished. So I think that paragraph, which I want to read more from this article in a minute, but I think that paragraph probably has as close of an answer as we're going to get. I don't think that the issues of the mill rising in the South carried as much weight going forward. I think you probably could, if you were going to remake it, you'd have to substitute something for that element of it.
Okay, yeah.
In my opinion.
Because even in the 1950s, it felt kind of dated.
Yeah, but you were close enough to it, the more people, it would resound with more people. So, continuing from this article, though, again from publicdomainmovie.net, Philip Yordan was officially given credit for the screenplay, but Ben Maddow claimed that he wrote it. Since Maddow was blacklisted for his radical and suspected but unproven communist activities during the 50s Red Scare, working without credit was the only way he could successfully submit screenplays. After decades of neglect, the film was restored, as we previously mentioned, by the UCLA Film and Television Archive under the supervision of master restorer Robert Gitt. As part of Gitt's restoration, Yordan's name was replaced by Maddow's in the main title role, although it does not appear on any current releases. That was all that was applicable from the article that I wanted to share, but I thought it was relevant enough.
What did you like about the film, and what didn't you like about the film?
I liked the interplay of the family. I liked the commitment of Robert Ryan's Ty Walden to this bit of looking for the gold. Once they go to town and meet Lance Fuller's Jim Leslie, why his son has chosen to change his name and things of that nature is never explained even remotely.
It's hinted at because they have that conversation with his dad, and later on when he goes to visit the farm after the funeral, he talks about, I've wanted to get out of this place since I was little. And his dad talks about how the woman he married didn't marry for love or any kind of passion, married because she was wealthy. And then she passed away, and then he has, her house and money.
I must have missed some of that. Yeah, I just like that interplay. I kind of liked... I didn't love the way that the family started to devolve as soon as they went to the saloon. But I thought that the scene back at Will and Rosamund's place worked with everyone hanging out there and knowing the subtext of having Griselda there. I thought that the factory scene mostly worked. Like when Griselda goes in to find him. Yeah. I thought that part worked. I think it would have been just as effective if he just turned on the lights and came out with Griselda. I think it would have worked just as well as him getting shot in that moment or going back in a second time. He could have been shot as they exited the factory after he's turned everything on, and it would have worked just as effectively. And then I thought that the ending was a little bit charming. There's other charming moments throughout the movie, including Darlene Jill's interaction with the albino Dave Dawson, played by Michael Landon. You can understand that was considered a racy scene in the 50s, but it worked. It was kind of charming. I just felt like the film was charming, and it was fun to watch. Though I going into it, I suspected I may not be as easily charmed based on its runtime of 1 hour and 58 minutes, which was quite long for the 1950s.
Was there anything you didn't like about that?
Again, that saloon scene, I feel like that could have been trimmed down or shot a little bit differently, or even substitute something else for it to affect that change in the family. But I felt like that was probably the weakest part, was when they go and see Lance Fuller's Jim Leslie and the subsequent saloon scene.
And what did you think of Buddy Hackett? Was Buddy Hackett used appropriate? Did he feel like he belonged in the movie?
The first half of the movie, yes. The second half, I didn't feel like he did. When I first saw Buddy Hackett, I was actually kind of excited, and I was like, "Oh man, I haven't seen something with him in a long time." And then by the end of the movie, I was like, "Yeah, I remember why I don't love Buddy Hackett."
Yeah.
But I enjoyed his character the first half of the movie. The second half, his getting taken advantage of by Darlin Jill is getting old, and just the way that he's being taken advantage of.
It is a bit of a one joke, that it's like, this guy seriously thinks he's going to be elected sheriff, and he actually does in the little epilogue at the end of the film. He has been elected.
It wasn't even that so much for me as it was the infatuation with Darlin Jill when she clearly is not reciprocating.
That was the other joke. The other joke was he's just sexually frustrated through the entire film. Darlin Jill is way out of his league.
Including the point when he's pumping the well for her.
Yeah, that is quite the innuendo scene, and it's not the only scene in which he is pumping something. He's pumping the ice cream thing at the end, and there's certain subtext to that. There's a lot of subtext to this.
There's a lot of innuendo in this movie, including when Will Thompson is climbing the ladder to the power station, and Rosamund is there. There's innuendo even as he's climbing the ladder. Yeah.
I thought that the movie, my frustration with the movie is that it's two movies. And I was expecting it to be, I kind of wanted it to be lustier and kind of racier, and that's what I thought I was getting in this film. I thought it was going to be more of a comedy, and it was going to really play up that part of it.
You didn't think this was an effective comedy?
Well, in the first half it was, but that second half is a different movie. It is... as I said before, that first half is a Hillbilly Peyton Place, and the second half is low-rent Tennessee Williams. And it wants to be about something. And it's like, oh, we're about something now. And it didn't entirely work for me.
Well...
I kind of wish it had been one way or the other.
I can see what you're saying, but I felt like they threw that out the window with him digging that hole at the very end of the movie. I felt like they went back to the original thing, and... Yeah. So that closing scene wrapped it up for me.
It kind of tied the two parts of it into it, and it said that Tai, he's incurable when it comes to that dream of getting rich. I thought his religiosity was played interestingly, because the title God's Little Acre, on his farm, he had set aside an acre and said everything from this acre goes to God. Put a metal cross there.
And I believe it was specific to a specific church, though I don't recall.
Yeah, to the Holiness Church, he said. And he moves the cross several times in the film when he starts to think that the gold might actually be on the land, on the acre where the cross is. And he's like, well, God will understand. I'd be too tempted to take his money if I didn't move it, so I'll move the cross.
Well, and I thought it was interesting how he prays for God's approval or permission to make these changes. I don't know which term is more appropriate, but each time he moves the cross, he says a little prayer. Including the last time that he moves it, he says, "If I'm offending you, strike me down." And he closes his eyes and waits for the lightning and thunder. And
he's an interesting character. This was reading online. There's people who have said that this is Robert Ryan's greatest performance, and I think there's some substance to that. He gives a solid, and I think the most consistent in some ways, performance in the film. Like, he bridges the comedy aspects and the more serious aspects quite well.
Yeah. I actually kind of liked Tina Louise's performance in this better than I do most of what I've seen of Gilligan's Island. I won't go out so far as to say I've seen every episode of Gilligan's Island, but I'm sure I've seen the majority of them. But I enjoyed her performance in this a little bit more. It felt more like a natural performance versus playing up the dumb, elements. And though her character is not a great person, so
I mean, they really play up some of the wardrobe, some of the angles that they choose to shoot her in. There are scenes where you can visibly see, the sweat on her. It's a very lusty performance, as of course is
Aldo Ray's Will Thompson and Faye Spain's Darlin Jill.
Faye Spain's Darlin Jill, yeah. She's something. Yeah,
indeed. This has an aggregate score on IMDb of 6.5 stars, but with less than 2,000 ratings. How would you rate this movie?
It does not have a Rotten Tomatoes rating.
Really?
Which is, sometimes that happens. I would give this movie 2 stars. on the 4-star scale, and I think I would give it a 6 on the 10.
So I actually like this one slightly more than you, and I would give this 2.5 on the 4-star. And I'm torn between a 7 and an 8 on the 10-star scale, though I think I'm going to settle on a 7 because of just how much innuendo and those types of things are in this movie, and familial, what's the word I'm looking for? The incest jokes are uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, her father-in-law has some pretty frank conversation. I mean, basically openly lusting after his son's wife and comfortable talking to him about it. And then the conversation he has with Buddy Hackett where they're kind of quasi-arranging the betrothal because he comes like, I love your daughter, I want to marry her. And it's for 1958. I mean, they avoid being too explicit, but the subtext is really strong.
Well, and I think the only reason that they get away with making the comments they do about Griselda is because it wouldn't technically be incest because she's an in-law.
She's the in-law, yeah.
But the way that he talks about his daughter-in-law is uncomfortable. Fortunately, it only occurs at the very beginning of the movie, and then it kind of goes away. But yeah, I want to give this 8 stars, but I really think this is probably just a 7-star movie. So.
And I was going to say that, the characters here they're all pretty good. They all have more or less something to do, with the exception of Vic Morrow's Shaw Walden, who is just basically an echo chamber for Buck. He literally says a lot of the same lines after Buck says them. He's kind of a blank slate. His personality is a lack of personality. And that he wants to go out on the town.
I actually was speculating, probably about 2/3 of the way through this movie, I was speculating if he was going to say anything original, or if everything he said was going to be repeating what Buck said. He does have a few original lines. There's a couple times when Buck has said something and he adds on to what Buck has said, but only late in the film.
When they're having that conversation about one of the brothers, like, this is crap and I don't believe in this, what has God done for us? And he says his most, what's the word I'm looking for? Substantive thing where he says, I don't entirely agree with Buck, which is what? He doesn't agree with Buck? I get what he's saying.
I thought his most substantive lines were outside the saloon.
Okay.
Which is the scene that I liked the least.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, God's Little Acre?
I would recommend this film, though.
How widely would you recommend it? I don't know who I would recommend it to.
So this is rated GP, which is, if I remember correctly, pretty similar to PG. So I wouldn't caution any recommendation. If you're listening to this and you've heard what we've talked about, there's going to be a lot of innuendo. There's some borderline incestuous jokes. There's some...
Not really any serious violence.
No, there's only a couple punches. There's no actual nudity portrayed in it.
Sex, some cleavage shots.
That's really all it is cleavage shots. So there's nothing there's nothing really that's on this that would say, there's someone who should avoid this. So if after listening to this review you have any interest in watching this, I would wholly recommend going out and watching it. It's public domain. You can find it on places like Tubi. We ended up watching it on YouTube and putting up with the ads, largely I think because neither one of us has explored Tubi and knows enough about it to do much with it, but it's out there in numerous places, so you can watch it wherever. And if you have any inclination to watch it after listening to this, I would say go watch it. Would you recommend it?
I would not widely. I wouldn't widely recommend it. If people have an interest in kind of exploitation, this is borderline exploitation. Or kind of the seamier side of the era of wholesome films. Yeah, it has some value in that canon as a kind of a C-list film literacy film.
Yeah,
but it's not bad. I think it's an awkward melding of two styles.
I think it also wants to play up, and this might go towards why this has never been remade. It really wants to play up some of that Southern plantation era vibe, which you can't comfortably do today. But it definitely wants to play up that with its score, which
Elmer Bernstein.
Yeah, the score in this is definitely very traditional Southern. So, yeah.
And if they remake it, I want them to go hog wild with it and completely commit in a way this film didn't do.
That's the problem, is nobody would do that, so I don't want to see it remade. So, yeah. Well, I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. Okay, guys, we're trying to record, and your little bone gnawing over here is getting in the recording.
Digging in the sun, digging in the ground till the digging was done. Come over to God's little acre, come over to God's little acre, come over to God's little acre, come back home.
You ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think so, and I was actually going to allude to some. My answer is going to be
A roundabout.
edit. On some level, I'm slightly surprised we talked for 30 minutes about this.
Me too. I'm like, this is going to be a 15-minute episode. So
I expected it to be right in that 20-minute range.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm glad I saw it.
I'm surprised I pulled out more facts on this one with that article.
And you liked it more than I did.
Yeah. Like I said, I felt like it was just charming. I can't think of a better word to describe it than charming.
Mm-hmm.
And its charm kind of won me over. Is it a great film? No.
Yeah.
But, like, in terms, like you said, it's a B or C list film, literacy film.
Yeah.
Like, if you're talking films with true movie buffs and you can say that you've seen God's Little Acre, that's going to give you some bonus points.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to do controversial films of the 50s, this would make a good double feature pairing with Peyton Place.
Yeah. Which I have not seen yet.
Well, we got to do Peyton Place at some point.
I'll add it to my list. So, yeah. You got any advertisements or outtakes for us?
Brought to you by the Cotton Workers Union.
Nice stick there. Alrighty. Oh, sorry, dude. Startled one of the dogs.
Yeah.
I woke you up. Yes, I did. The dogs were actually pretty good.
Yeah.
We only had her bark at the screen the one time with the little pig.
Yeah.
His biggest thing was chewing, which he always does.